And Volvolt was... who? Hello, welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I am Tina. Today I'm doing a book review of The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan. This is a fantasy novel that came out last year in 2022 from Orbit. Oh my god. I listened to this book on Audible, and while it doesn't seem like anything beyond a generic fantasy at first glance, it is so much more than that. I am obsessed with it. I couldn't stop listening to it. There are no spoilers in this review, and here is what the book is about. An Emperor's Justice. Sir Conrad Vonvolt always has the last word. His duty is to uphold the law of the Empire using whatever tools he has at his disposal. Whether it's his blade, the arcane secrets passed down from justice to justice, or his wealth of knowledge of the laws of the Empire. But usually his reputation as one of the most revered and hated justices is enough to get most any job done. When Vonvolt investigates the murder of a noblewoman, he finds his authority being challenged like never before. As the simple case becomes more complex and convoluted, he begins to pull at the threads that unravel a conspiracy that could see an end to all justices and a beginning to lawless chaos across the Empire. There is one thing that this book blurb fails to mention, and that's the main character is not really Vonvolt. The main character is Helena, his scribe, his clerk, who basically follows him around and takes notes and is basically his apprentice. And she actually tells the story. It's a memoir kind of, fake memoir story. And yeah, the blurb forgets to mention that, which is something that would have appealed to me. So I'm really glad that something else drew me into this book because I really liked that aspect. It is an amazing novel, not so much because of the story, but because of the different types of stories that are contained within it. And yes, I'm going to list them. First, you have a story within a story, as the novel is essentially a fictional memoir by an older woman looking back on her younger years. Sometimes, often, a frame story is kind of cliche, especially if it's just bookending the novel together and doesn't really add anything to the characters or the theme. Like if you have a frame story that just starts at the start and ends at the end but isn't interwoven into the story itself, it's kind of like, well, what is the point? This book, though, is aware of its existence as a frame the entire time, with the narrator consistently breaking the fourth wall, in a sense, to comment on how her opinions on this and that have changed, etc., things like that. It reminded me a lot of Along the Razor's Edge by Rob J. Hayes, which was one of my favorite books from last year, as that book, too, has an older woman telling what happened when she was young. If we didn't have the older Helena's perspective, the sometimes silly things that she does or thinks might be frustrating, but because it's an older woman recounting the foibles of youth, it's remarkably relatable. That part is cool in and of itself, but then it's also a political fantasy about the intricacies of governmental and shipping systems. So much of the story deals with the politics and trade of the empire, but away from the capital city. It's so engrossing because it's not about rich people trying to stay in power, though it is in a sense, but not in like the kind of Game of Thrones sense. It's more how these country provinces don't really want to be under the empire, and there's this slow growing disillusionment with the empire, and the main characters are unaware of this going into the story. It's about power systems too, about the hazards of giving people ultimate control over the lives of others. Vonvolt is essentially Judge Dredd. He's judge, jury, and executioner over the towns in the Empire's control, and he too, like the 90s Judge Dredd movie, is uncovering a mystery while enforcing the law. And like the Carl Urban Judge Dredd from the 2010s, I think, it might be 2008, I don't know, he too has a young woman apprentice with him. Yet, unlike Judge Dredd, he does not fight a giant robot. Sorry folks. The novel also does what I love when novels do, and that's also release exposition as the story progresses when it's proprietary. This also ties into the faux memoir aspect, as Helena forgets to explain things at times, then it comes back to her later, as one does when telling a story, and especially when one assumes readers are aware of what was going on at that point in history at the time of the telling. So yeah, it's kind of like she's not writing it for us, she's writing it for the people of her world, obviously. The novel is also, which made me want to read it, a murder mystery. The mystery begins as the core aspect of the story, but soon spreads into a political aspect, and we even get a bit of a courtroom drama at one point. Some people read, like, spicy books to get their jollies on, but for me, give me some courtroom drama any day. Closing and opening statements, I just love it. The novel doesn't go where you expect in the slightest, and despite the rapid-fire plot and the riding between towns that happens quite a bit, the novel also gives us two extremely interesting and likable characters. Helena is wonderful. She's smart, resourceful, brave, and endearingly naive about other things, as one is at 19. She's so well-crafted, realistic, and likable. She struggles internally almost the entire book, and that's a good thing. It makes her interesting. And Vonvolt was... just as interesting. He's a privileged man who is both a badass and a bit of a dork, and he also has a deep moral center. Helena's affection for him is as varied and complex as he is. She sees him as a father figure, a mentor, and sometimes, though she doesn't want to admit it, she's attracted to him. I mean, how can you not be, due to sriracha on top of Frank's Red Hot? Despite Helena telling us what is essentially someone else's story, Vonvolt's, it's also just as much her story. It's how she got her start in the world, something that we're not sure about yet. I can kind of guess, but I hope this trilogy, I'm assuming it's a trilogy, will surprise me, because it has surprised me so far. Sometimes another person can really influence our paths in life, and this novel shows how powerful a mentor can be. The supporting characters, and there are many of them, are excellent as well. None of them are hyperbolic villains or saints. They all feel human. Bressinger was great. I love a gruff and grouchy right-hand man. I also loved how it was a rather typical Western fantasy setting, but while there was some sexism, it wasn't like this deep normalized misogyny of our medieval world. While it's less common to have a woman soldier or a business person in the countryside, for example, in this book, they aren't outlawed. It's not seen as an aberration. They aren't kind of looked down upon for it. Likewise, Helena is advised against sleeping with dudes, not because it would sully her character, but because getting pregnant would ruin her career. For a novel written by a man, there was a good focus on women's perspectives on things, which I totally appreciated. There were several prominent women characters of different backgrounds and strengths as well, which I always like. The magic system is fantastic, and how magic is rare and not often used. As much as I enjoy a fantasy with an intricate magic system, the lack of that in this novel helped keep it grounded and more realistic. When it did happen, you took notice, and it had consequences. The prose wasn't particularly elegiac, but it's well crafted with snappy dialogue, tongue-in-cheek humor, detailed descriptions that don't go overboard into over-description, and it's easy to follow. Despite the kind of, not convoluted, but kind of intricate plot, I was never kind of confused as to what was going on. I was never like, wait, who is this, who is that, blah, 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 which is my usual state of being. Overall, I have to say about this novel, if you couldn't tell, I loved it. On my Instagram, I do a monthly wrap-up where I also have a year-long book battle going. I pick one book a month that is my favorite, and then at the end of the year, I'll have to pick a winner from these 12. I was assuming I'd be picking an indie book this month, but I don't know. I loved this book so much. So much that I skipped over 3 other books on my audiobook TBR to listen to The Tyranny of Faith. So expect that review in early May. Maybe I'll start doing like a wrap-up at the end of the month for my channel as well, and I can bring my book battle into it, and you guys can see what my favorite books are of the year. Anyway, if you want. Anyway, again, thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments if you've read the book, if you would also call Vonvolt Daddy, because, I mean, how can you not?